Well, good morning and welcome to an absolutely gorgeous sunrise up in the Kintamani region of Bali. Today I wanted to come up here and shoot some photos for you guys so I could run you through 6 of my top Lightroom editing tips and how to really take your photos, edit them into something that you want. Especially as a beginner, these tips are going to help you out immensely. I'm going to hang around here for about another 10 to 15 minutes to see what happens with these clouds and fog. If nothing clears, I'll just head home and we'll dive straight into Lightroom. So we're here in the office and wow, what a morning. I am blown away by the conditions we got on the drone. Honestly, they were basically once in a lifetime shots, in my opinion. Those inverted clouds were just on another level, and I cannot wait to show you the shot that I shot and edited. It is, in my opinion, pretty damn cool. Okay, so I have this first shot here of Second Pool Waterfall, and unfortunately I wasn't able to take enough photos this morning to kind of cover all of these tips because I was stuck on the ground while the conditions were up in the sky. But that's okay, I'm gonna show you tip number 1, and that is basically how to add just a little bit more oomph and punch into your images. Now, as you can see, this shot is fairly flat and there's not too much depth to it. There's obviously a lot going on. There's this waterfall, and we've got this one kind of frame here. We've got some foreground elements all around the place, but it's not too punchy. It doesn't really stand out. So I'm gonna show you how to do that. Now, a really simple way to do this is to add a whole lot of contrast. Now, yes, it might be easy just to slide that contrast slider up, but it's not really achieving what we want to. So I'm gonna pull that back down just a little bit, but I'm gonna leave just a little bit of contrast in the image. I'm gonna increase the exposure just a touch, and then we're gonna really focus on the highlights, shadows, whites and blacks, and the tone curve. Contrast really is just increasing the bright parts of the image and decreasing the dark parts of the image. We're gonna be doing that, and as you can see already, this image is looking a little bit more punchy. So all we've done here is increase the highlights, decrease the shadows, increase the white point, and increase the black point. So instantly we've got a little bit more punch. This water is standing out a whole lot more, and these kind of shadows and even down in here are looking a lot more dark and rich. So now we're gonna move on to the tone curve, and we're basically gonna be doing the same thing here. So if you haven't used the tone curve before, I'll probably do a video explaining everything you can do with the tone curve because this thing is incredible. But basically what you've got here is the shadow part of the image, the midtones, the highlights, the white point, and the black point. And a really nice way to add some contrast into your image is to add a simple S-curve. So we're gonna bring down the shadows a little bit here. We're gonna increase the midtones, increase the highlights just a little bit, and then if you wanted to, you could just increase the blacks a little bit, and it kind of fades out the image of like the really dark areas of the image. And that's basically tip number 1. So we're just going to add a little bit more oomph and punch into our images. Obviously this doesn't work for every single image. If your highlights are blown out, bring down the highlights instead of increasing the highlights, and vice versa for the shadows. But it's a really cool way to add a little bit more punch into your image if you're feeling like it's a bit flat. Okay, so moving on to tip number 2, and this is a shot from this morning. Like I said, the conditions were incredible. Now, I haven't really done an edit on this photo, but I just wanted to run you through the local adjustments. I would say a good 35 to 40% of my entire Lightroom process is local adjustments. You've got the radial filter here, you've got the gradual filter, and you've got the brush tool. Now, the radial and the gradual filter work fairly similarly, but I find myself using the radial filter a whole lot more because you can simply just select a part of the image and go from there. So what I'm gonna be doing is I'm just gonna add a little bit of haze in between these two mountains here to kind of show more light piercing through the photo. Now, this isn't super technical or super hard, but as you can see, if we show our selected mask overlay and we invert it, we're selecting everything. So we've got the sky selected, the mountain selected, and the cloud selected, which isn't ideal because obviously we don't want to affect the brightness of the sky. Otherwise, that's going to look super artificial. So what we can do is we can come down here into the edit tab and we can select range mask and luminance. We can then select the dropper and we can make sure, we can make a selection of the mountain here. And as you can see, if we do this, we're just gonna completely remove the sky from this local adjustment. If I press O, that will remove the mask overlay, and then I can come down here and further kind of tweak how I want the range mask to kind of act. So if I turn that selected mask overlay on again, I can kind of bring down the highlights just a little bit, and it starts removing this kind of area on the clouds, which is ideal, but it keeps these mountains 100% selected, which is exactly what we're after. We'll put the dropper back, we will unselect the mask overlay, and then we're just going to increase the exposure a little bit, increase the blacks a little bit, and dehaze down. And then all of a sudden we've got this nice kind of glow through these mountains. And if I remove this, you can see they're just very dark, and now there's just like a little bit more light floating through. It kind of blends in with the image a little bit nicer, even could be mistaken for a little bit of fog or haze. Now if you think about it, you can do so much with this tool. You can also select colors. So let's say if I select the whole sky, we invert it, and I press O, we can hit color instead of luminance, and if I just select blue, it's going to deselect all the other colors. So you can kind of tweak the range mask like we did with the luminance, with the color, and you can kind of tell it how much or how accurate you want it to be. So you can kind of dial it back, and as you can see, it really only selects where we've selected, or that color, or if we keep boosting it up, it's going to get a little bit more blasé with what it's selected. But yeah, this is honestly a game changer for photo editing, and I couldn't recommend it more. All right, next up is camera calibration. Now this is kind of hidden away at the bottom of the editing tab, which is a little bit annoying because I see a lot of people overlook this tab. So if we get a little bit technical, it is basically the ability to change how red, green, and blue are represented in your images. Now I use this in every one of my shots, and in all honesty, it creates a nice little kind of consistent, cohesive flow within your images, which is great. And while I'm sure there's some good science to kind of be able to correct your camera calibration, if you will, this is how I personally do it, and it's just a way to get really nice colors. Let's start off with the red primary here, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push and pull and see what kind of way I prefer the image to be looking. So I like it when it's on the left side of this image, and I'm going to do the same for the saturation here. I definitely like it on the left, and then I'm just going to work my way down into the blue, or on the right for this one for sure. Do this again, have a little look. I do like it on the right side. And then we're gonna do it one more time, definitely on the left, and we'll see the saturation. Let's go with the right side. And then if we flick this off and on, it's a super small little kind of effect on your image, but in my opinion, it just gives that nice little touch. If you're looking to add just a little bit more spice into your images, or even just have finer control of the colors, the calibration sliders are definitely for you. Moving on to clipping. Now, clipping is super important, and I didn't understand this for quite a time, but basically in a high contrast shot like this, there are gonna be a lot of bright areas and dark areas, and we wanna make sure that we're not losing any information in these areas. Now, what I mean by that is when a part of the image or any pixels are completely black or completely white. Now, Lightroom has been kind enough to bake in a lovely kind of clipping mask overlay to show you what areas of your image are completely black or completely white, and I'll show you how to do it. So if you press J on your keyboard, you'll see in the histogram here, you have these like little white boxes over the white and black points of your image. And if we just crush the blacks, you can see this blue overlay on the image, and that's telling me, okay, this is clipped. So if we peel it back just a little bit, we now know that -16 is the darkest we would be able to go on this image before we start losing any information. And then if we check out the whites, well, we can see up here that big red overlay. We can peel this back just a little bit as well. Now, I don't particularly like the look of super blown out highlights, so I'd also dial back the highlights. But this is a great way to kind of know if you've pushed your contrast way too far, or if your exposure is way too bright or way too dark. Okay, so moving on to tip number 5, and that is to edit with reference photos. Now, what I mean by this is you can pull up a reference image like this, and you can then kind of work with this image to create a more cohesive, consistent flow throughout your images. I'll show you what I mean. I'm not gonna sit you guys through a full photo edit because it's probably gonna take about 5 to 10 minutes. I will basically speed run through how I'm gonna be able to match these tones with these tones so I can get a very similar feel on my Instagram feed. Okay, and there we go. So while this image has no oranges in it compared to 3 of the images on this side, I feel like I've matched the green tones enough, and it's honestly just looking back and forward between pushing and pulling the sliders, and I'm sure you'll get a fairly consistent result. I'm gonna be doing a whole video explaining exactly how to do this process and how to take other people's Instagram photos and kind of use them as inspiration for your editing techniques and run you through exactly how it's all done. And last but not least, tip number 6 is instead of using global saturation, use the HSL sliders. So what I mean by this, instead of using the vibrance and the saturation sliders to control everything, come down here to the HSL tab and use the saturation sliders. You can see here I've done heaps of adjustments to all the colors here except for purple and magenta because, well, there are none in the photo. This way I can fine tune and tweak the image exactly how I would want it. So if I reset all of these sliders, as you can see, the image is really not looking nearly as good as it was before. So just dialing back that blue, dialing a little bit back the orange and the yellow, come back on the greens if there are any, and including the aquas, dial those back a little bit. There are basically no reds, maybe my skin tone a little bit, dial those back. And this way I can make different colors kind of stand out versus others. With the saturation and the vibrance, that's just gonna boost all the colors equally, or all the colors that don't stand out equally, or decrease them equally. This way, if I want more blue in my photo, I can do that without affecting the oranges and the yellows, or if I want less blue in my photo, guess what? I can do that without affecting the oranges and the yellows. This way you get to choose what colors you want to pull out or pull back, and you're gonna get a much better result. So guys, that's gonna wrap up today's video. If you have enjoyed, let me know down in the comments. It's a bit longer than my usual videos, but being able to cover all these Lightroom tips takes a little bit of time, so hopefully you guys have learned something and you can put it into practice. All right guys, once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.